Here's something you may not know. Under the right circumstances, most of us would electrocute a harmless guy with a heart problem if a researcher in a lab coat ordered us to. Don't believe me? Just ask Stanley Milgram. Milgram was born in New York City in 1933 to Jewish Hungarian parents who emigrated to the States, likely to avoid the death camps in Nazi-occupied Europe. His parents had a successful bakery in the Bronx, and Milgram was a highly motivated student who attended James Monroe High School with another famed social scientist, Philip Zimbardo. At Harvard, Milgram worked as a research assistant on Solomon Asch's conformity studies, which showed a subject would easily conform to a larger group even when they knew the group was wrong. Eventually, he landed at Yale, where he set out to know how far individual conformity would extend. Milgram earned his PhD in psychology in 1960, the very same year that Mossad agents captured Adolf Eichmann, the war criminal who had managed the logistics of the systematic extermination of millions of Jews and others in Nazi death camps. He'd soon stand trial on war crimes in Israel. Milgram would write that these mass atrocities may have originated in the mind of a single person, but they could only have been carried out on a massive scale if a very large number of people obeyed orders. While working with Asch, Milgram saw how readily subjects submitted to a group when the stakes were low. Subjects in Asch's seminal study simply had to decide whether to give the same answers as others on a visual acuity test. Milgram wanted to know how far that conformity would extend. Would individuals conform to a group even if it went against their own moral judgment? So he began recruiting subjects for a study of memory, taking out an ad offering $4.50 for an hour of a subject's time. He told prospective subjects that he was examining how punishment impacts learning. 40 men, ranging in ages from 20 to 50, answered the ad and took part in the first trial. They came with a variety of educational backgrounds. A few hadn't finished elementary school, while others had doctorates or professional degrees. The procedure was simple. Subjects were brought into a study one at a time where they met another subject, a mild-mannered 47-year-old accountant named Mr. Wallace. The experimenters asked the men to draw from 2 slips of paper, randomly assigning each to either be a teacher or a learner. We'll get into the fine print of the paper slips later, but all 40 subjects in the experiment ended up as teachers. They then watched as experimenters strapped the learner, Mr. Wallace, into what amounted to an electric chair in which he'd receive shocks if he did not learn according to plan. He casually mentioned as they strapped him in that he had a heart condition, nothing serious. Subjects then watched as the experimenter told Wallace, "Although the shocks can be extremely painful, they cause no permanent tissue damage." The teacher was then taken to another room and seated in front of an impressive instrument with a row of 30 electrical switches called a shock generator. Then he got to work, reading pairs of words for Mr. Wallace to learn. Soon the teacher began quizzing Wallace on the words, and if Wallace got the pairs wrong, the teacher gave him an electric shock. Each time Wallace gave a wrong answer, the teacher was told to increase the shock by 15 volts, all the way up to a lethal dose of 450 volts, announcing the voltage each time he flipped a switch. Milgram wondered how far would subjects go, even if they could hear poor Mr. Wallace in the adjoining room screaming in agony and demanding to be released.
That is incorrect. This one will be 195 volts. The correct one.
Let me out of here.
Slow. Dance.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let
Go
me
on.
out. Let me out.
Responsible for it. Red. That is incorrect. This will be at 3:30. The correct phrase is rich
Let me out of
boy.
here. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out, I tell you. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to hold me here.
The next phrase is
Let me
fast,
out. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
bird,
Let me
car,
out.
train, plane.
Continue, teacher.
That is incorrect. This will be 3:45.
It turns out that every last subject, 100%, continued to apply shocks to the upper limit of the range titled intense shock. Only 5 subjects became defiant at the prospect of administering the highest level shocks, and 8 refused to shock Wallace in the range of extreme intensity shock. Only 1 refused within the spectrum of danger, severe shock. A total of 26 of the 40 subjects obeyed fully, giving Wallace the highest level of shock. Remember, it was a lethal dose, by which time his protests had stopped and he sat in silence. Spoiler alert, Mr. Wallace was an actor. Remember those slips of paper? Both of them read teacher, but Mr. Wallace kept his hidden. Each and every time he played the role of the learner, and despite the impressive shock generator, no one was getting shocked. It was all an elaborate, fearsomely realistic hoax. But the subjects didn't know that, and they were stressed. Milgram would later write that subjects were observed to sweat, tremble, stutter, bite their lips, groan, and dig their fingernails into their flesh. 14 subjects showed definite signs of nervous laughter and smiling, and 3 of them had full-blown, uncontrollable seizures of laughter, with one laughing so violently and convulsively that they had to end the experiment. One more thing about this experiment. While the Institutional Review Board, or IRB, was not yet fully established or required, Milgram did ensure that all the subjects left the laboratory after an interview and what he called a de-hoax. He conducted what would today be called a debriefing, telling subjects about the true nature of the experiment so they didn't leave with the belief that they had in fact shocked poor Mr. Wallace. The actor even reappeared at the end, unharmed and smiling. So why is this study important? Milgram wanted to see how far obedience extended when the stakes were much higher than Ash's conformity test of 3 little lines. He was interested in when and how people will defy authority in the face of a clear moral imperative. Like Ash, Milgram found that context plays a large role in whether individuals are obedient, despite their better judgment. But he also found that ordinary people simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part can become agents in a terrible, destructive process. Remember, Mr. Wallace was a mild-mannered accountant with a heart problem. What was surprising was how far ordinary individuals would go simply because they felt they had to comply with the experimenter's instructions. Milgram calls the results both surprising and dismaying, and was stunned at the fact that so many subjects simply couldn't resist authority. Many subjects told experimenters afterwards, "I wouldn't have done it by myself, I was just doing what I was told." The key, he'd later write, was that subjects believe responsibility for the heinous act lies not with the person who carries it out, but with the person who ordered it. Milgram would eventually replicate the experiment in different versions with more than 1,000 subjects at several universities. But the idea was controversial for its time, and it may have cost him a tenured position at Harvard. He died of a heart attack at the age of 51. Subsequent research has cast the experiments in a new light, suggesting that Milgram got people to inflict the shocks because subjects thought they were advancing the cause of science. But Milgram's study laid the theoretical groundwork for helping us understand all manner of atrocities, from the genocide in Rwanda to the torture at Abu Ghraib. Obedience to authority is not a feature of German culture, Milgram wrote, but a seemingly universal feature of human behavior. Remember that when you head to the polls this November. Escape to the Ivory Tower is written, edited, and produced by us, Lindsay Portnoy and Greg Topo. For more information on our sources, our music, and our media, see the link below. And if you like what you heard, don't forget to tell your friends about us.